Well, hello and welcome back to the series on the junk journal Psalter that I'm working on. I've been hinging pages. I wanted to share how I'm doing that and why that's a little bit bigger of a deal with this journal than it would be with others. As I've explained in previous videos, and I would suggest going back and kind of watching those to understand what I'm doing here. So this is like a typical junk journal. And with one that's this size, which is about 9 inches by about 6 inches or so, or even 8.5 by 5.5, somewhere in there is usually what you're going to end up with. We typically use just a folded piece of regular copy paper for our pages, and that works out really well. But in this journal, it's actually going to be bigger than that. I want it to be a little bit taller and a little bit wider, and so we're having to put together pages that will work for this, which means that we're having to sort of glue some stuff together, which is kind of what we mean in the junk journal world by hinging paper together. We're basically hinging it in the middle so that whenever we put together a signature, we can put several sheets in here. So I wanted to show you kind of my process and technique for doing some different hinge styles. This is the book board that I'm going to use. I'm going to cut this spine off. I'm going to use this book board, which is 9 1/4 or a little more than 9 1/4 by a little more than 7. And so my pages are 9 1/4 by 7 inches is what I've been going for on my page size. Well, that's obviously more than a folded over piece of 8.5 by 11, so that's where we get today. And you can see this is the book board I'm using, and this is more of a standard size junk journal, so it's quite a bit bigger. So we're having to kind of make some paper to go in it. Now, in previous videos, I've explained how I have some dot grid paper that I got from a composition notebook that's already hinged. And so half of my paper is already hinged, but the other half I'm using some decorative stuff to do background pages for half of the pages in my journal. I've got a mix of things. I printed out from Wikimedia some Psalter manuscripts, some different images from Wikimedia. Of course, all of that's in the public domain. I really like using that stuff. I've got some scrapbook paper. I have some coffee dyed paper. I have some book page here that I've used. And then I pulled from my stash a few other things. This would be more like a standard size for a junk journal, and I think I actually even made these for a journal in the past and then just didn't end up using them. And so you can see that they're significantly smaller than my pages. And I'm going to use a few of these even though they're short. I can always add fold outs or just enjoy the fact that they're shorter. I don't have a problem with that. So I pulled some of these from my stash of odds and ends that I have just to sort of round out all the pages I need, and I like some of the botanical stuff that I want to add into this Psalter. In the next video I do, I'm going to do a little bit more explanation of how I got here and sort of the context of how I got into this whole idea of making a junk journal Psalter and what I'm going to really use it for. I'll explain that in a little more detail, though I've already kind of explained some of that in a previous video. But for today, what I want to talk about is this page hinging. I want to show you a few different techniques. We'll get to those in a minute. And so, because I'm going for 9 1/4 by 7, what I'm really going for is 9 1/4 by 14. And any way that you can put those together in any kind of a creative way. Now, I went through, you'll see, that I went through and glued these first, and then I came back through and did some decorative stitching on my sewing machine, which I won't show. I don't do sewing in a video, or at least not in this series. I'm not doing that. And so that's really just decorative though. All these pages have been glued before I did anything. And so I've got, this is of course just a piece of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper that I cut down to get the right size, glued it to some copy paper. This is some decorated copy paper from my last video. I showed how I do this decorating with acrylic paint. And so that's one kind of variation that you'll see. This is some of that manuscript paper that I just printed onto copy paper, and then I decorated the paper. Again, the previous video shows me decorating, how I do the acrylic paint distressing. And then this is just a piece of journal paper. And so again, I kind of measured it out to size to get 14 by 9 1/4, did some trimming on it, glued it, and then I've gone back through with some of this and done some stitching. So that's the manuscript paper. Here's another one where I had some like tea-dyed stuff. This is a horizontal where I wanted to use this as a landscape. This is also from Wikimedia, an illustration that I wanted to use from that, and some tea-dyed stuff here. And basically all I did was build a page that's 14 by 9 1/4, and kind of glued it together, and then did some sewing on it just for the decoration of it. And so in this video I'm going to show you kind of the details of how I hinge, you know, basic copy paper together. This is an example of that. 2 pieces of copy paper that I hinge together to get the right size. Then I have the scrapbook paper, the horizontal like this, and then the other one that I have is these that are book page. I found these book pages in, I buy books at the thrift store, old books that have nice illustrations or pretty pages, whatever it is. If I find a book that I like the looks of, I'll buy that. And I use this book page here, and I actually hinged it with some fabric. And in this case I did glue it just a little bit, sewed it, and then I've ironed all of this so that it'll lay flat. This is going to be a chunky journal, and I'm okay with chunky, but I do want to have everything as flat as possible. And so I'll show you this technique as well with the fabric. Now the fabric actually does work out really well. It seems really flimsy when you first put it together. You're like, how is this going to hold up? But if you've got paper on either side of it, a leaf going over it this way and a leaf tucked into it this way, it actually, I think, strengthens the signature because you're sewing through fabric rather than paper. And so I really kind of like that method anyway. And so I'll do a fabric one. I got a little carried away when I was doing this and really kind of did all the ones that I want for my journal. But for the sake of showing you folks how to do it, we're going to go ahead and hinge these together. And I'll show you how I do that. It's pretty simple. Now, I have all of this paper sort of separated into categories here. I have this first pile is kind of it's my blank paper that I've distressed. So it's all just copy paper with no print on it at all. So that's kind of one category. Then I have all of my manuscript stuff that I tea-dyed. That's really kind of faded out into a different category. And as I start to put things together, this will make more sense. Then I have sort of my painted manuscripts that I did in the last video. And then I have this scrapbook paper. So as I go through and choose these pages, which ones to hinge together, here's the reason that they need to be hinged in the first place. Let's use this pink paper because it contrasts really well on my mat. So the reason we need that, I'm going to line this up on 7 inches here. I don't know if you can see, that's 7 inches. We need our pages to be 7 inches wide. If you take this to 14, which is right here, this is why we need to hinge a page on here so that it ends up being the full width that we need. This is the other thing to consider. Some of this is directional. We don't want to do things upside down. That's no fun. Ask me how I know. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take, say, a piece of this scrapbook paper and a piece of blank stuff. And then what we're going to do, we'll actually turn this over this way. Okay, we want to look at, we're going to be cutting some of this off at 9 inches. So if we work from the top down, we're going to end up right at her feet, which is good. And so what we're going to do is we're going to line this paper up and hinge it this way, like this. And then we'll end up trimming it off here. And then we'll trim some off here probably, or both. We'll take a look and see how we like the way it looks before we trim off the sort of the width of it. And so the easiest way to start this is, and of course this is just blank, so it's non-directional. Still a little curly from being painted, but that's okay. Now, I like to make this a little bit thick, like glue it a little bit thick. Wide, I mean. In other words, a pretty wide, band here. Part of the reason for that is because if I decide to go back through and put some stitching here, which I may very well do, I don't want this stitching to end up right on the spine where it's going to fold, because that just adds bulk right at the spine of the signature, and that's not good. That's not helpful. So now we're going to be working off of 7 so that hopefully you can see better. Maybe we can work off of this end over here. We can. So if we take this whole piece of paper, so now the other thing too, I'm going to glue all of this stuff first, and then I'll go back and add any sewing that I want to do. The sewing is really just aesthetic. I don't sew it to hold it. That's too much. It's easier just to go ahead and glue it first and then add stitching where you want it. So if I take this and I fold it over at 7, yeah, let's work from here. Okay, so if I take this at 7, this is 7 inches here, and I take it to 14, then what that's going to give me is a fold right there where my lady is, and it's going to cut off basically right here. So that's going to be kind of my thing. And I really would rather not. When you're looking at and considering where your hinge is going to be and where the fold is going to be, keep in mind that this much of the journal, you know, and even on the other side, this much of the journal, you're not going to be able to see because it's going to be the edge, it's going to be in the crease of your signature. And so whatever you want to see more of is what you need to, where you need to fold it. So I bet if I were to put it about here, and we could go this way too. There's no reason we couldn't. So let's put it back on 7 this way. And then we'll fold it at 14. So that's going to give me one page that looks like that. About like that. And then let's kind of crease that just temporarily. Another page that's going to look something like that. Yeah, I think I like that the best. Okay, on this one, this was over here, and I got a new scoreboard, and the scoreboard literally just cracked the paper. I'm not happy about that. Could it be user error? Possibly, so I'm not going to say what scoreboard it is. It's not one of the really common sort of like nicer ones. It's really kind of a less expensive, less quality one. So it's not that surprising. Anyways, I'm not real happy about that. So, what I'm going to do is go with the flow, man. So, I measured this from 7 to 14, folded it over, and now I'm going to put this one on this side. And then I'll have 2 sheets like that, which is still cool. Like, you know, go with the flow, man. That's all I can say. Come on, boo. Okay, try to get it somewhat straight. Okay. Ooh, that's kind of weird. Might be doing something different there. That's kind of weird looking. Okay. So this is my 7 inches, right? Yes, okay. That one's a Franken page from a Franken page, man. But it all works out. It'll be just fine. It's one of the things I love about junk journaling. As weird and off-putting as that is, the pink with that cool brown is kind of weird. It's one of the things I love about junk journaling is you can still do it. Like, who cares? You're gonna fix it. You're gonna change it. If you don't like it, cover it with something. In a previous era in my life, I was an accountant. Very left-brained kind of work. And junk journaling is a very refreshing opposite of that. And so, it's one of the reasons I love it, is because you just can't hardly make mistakes with it. It's so forgiving and so easy to just go with what you have. There, now I have that. Cool. Let's go back to some of our other manuscript pages. I have to say that I think this Hebrew one is probably like my favorite. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to take off this margin because I want, let's do it the other way, it's easier, maybe. I want a torn edge on it anyways. Oops. I was afraid of that. There we go. Like that. Okay. There we go. Okay, now I'm lining it up at the 7 here. I'm going to fold it over at the 14. Like that. And then the light outside is changing a lot. Okay. And then I want to take it off of this bottom part here. Nine and a quarter. There we go. That's quite lovely. Okay, this is one more variation of sort of building these signature pages. That this one might give you heartburn if you've never done one before, and so I thought I would show you an example of this. Again, we're going for 9 and a quarter. This is horizontal, or like landscape. And if we want to keep that landscape orientation in the journal, but not have it be too short or too short this way, we can deal with this. And we do it by getting a little creative. Of course, this is a regular copy paper. It's regular copy paper, so it's 8.5 inches wide, or in this case, because it's landscape, long. And so we need it to be 9 and a quarter long. And so what we're going to do first, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a strip of something to this. Let's see, what would look cool? Let's see, how about just something simple like that? Yeah. Now, before I actually put this on there, I want to ink it. Just easier to do it now before I glue it on there. So this is just an offcut of another 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So that keeps it simple. Okay, so we're just going to glue this down. Just make sure if this is 8.5 by 8.5 inches long, we need another 3/4 of an inch, basically. Otherwise, you'll be gluing another piece of paper to that one if you get it too short. Okay, so we're just adding our length to it, just like that. Now, we're going to do the same thing that we've done with the other sheets. Let's find... So now we need to add width to it this way. And I want to preserve as much of this manuscript paper as possible and not end up having to cut some of it off. And so I'm going to keep this, and of course this is 8.5, or it was 8.5 by 11, so it's 11 inches this way. So now we need it to be 14 inches. And so we can go like this. I'm just going to use an offcut because I want to preserve as much of this as possible. Do I want to tear that edge? Maybe I will just a little bit, so I'm actually going to pull this out by 1/2 inch. And we're going to glue it there. Just like that-ish. There we go. Okay. Squish. And now we're going to line it up. Again, I'm doing this on the 7-inch mark. Let's do it this way. I'm going to line this up on the 7-inch mark. And then we're going to put the ruler on the 14. A little behind the 14 actually. And then we're just going to use that ruler to put a fold in it. And then we'll square it up. Like that. So now we have a little to tear off there. Let's do this first. I'm not keeping this simple, am I? We're going to take our length off first because we have this chaos here that needs to be dealt with. Okay, so that gives us 9 1/4 length. And then, it's frustrating to tear off a little tiny piece like that because it never wants to tear very well. It's going to slip out from under the ruler. There. Good enough. Alright, now we have our seven-inch width and 9 1/4 height. And so that's kind of how you take a horizontal sheet and sort of incorporate it into your page. So I have one page that looks like that. Psalm 2. So cool. A page that looks like that, a page that looks like this, and one that has Psalm 3. Okay, so here I have 2 pages that I'm going to hinge with fabric, and they came from 2 different books. So this is like a wildlife, like a Reader's Digest wildlife journal thing. So I have that. Kind of not a big fan of the bugs on the back, although it does have ladybugs. That's kind of cool. Anyways, so I have that, and then I have this sheet, and they came from different books. And as you can see, this one's a little bit taller than this one. That's okay. Now, if I really wanted to be precise about the height, and I was worried about my size here, see, like this is measuring at less than 9 1/4, so I could use this in my journal, and it's going to be a little shorter than the other pages, making this one even shorter. And honestly, that's okay for a few pages. I'm okay with variation in the size. If you're not, then cut them all uniformly. You know, and you could do that with this page very easily. You could cut the bottom off of this page and make it the same height as this. In this case, I'm not going to worry about it because I'm okay with that. I'm okay with variation and all of that in my journal. But what I will say is that with junk journaling, things don't have to be perfect most of the time. They don't need to be perfect. But there are some things that will cause you a headache if you're not paying attention to certain things. And one of those things is making sure that your pages line up really square. And so now this is going to be fabric, and so once I do this, it's going to be really kind of floppy until I iron it. And so having it be really square is easier to deal with the fabric, but by the time you iron it and everything, you do want it to line up really square. All of your pages, you can use, if you have a mat like this, you can use your lines on your mat to square everything up, so that whenever you fold everything, everything folds really square and stays really neat in that way. Otherwise, you're going to have pages that are just kind of not lining up, and that's a headache. And so what I'm going to do with this particular one, because I need, you know, 9 1/4, typically these are going to be shorter than that, and I'm okay with it. But this way I want it to be 14 inches, and because I'm going to go ahead and hinge it with the fabric, I can make it that size. Okay, so I'm going to line this up on the 7-inch mark right here. And then this one I'm going to line it up on, I have to have glasses, I can't see what I'm doing. I'm going to line this up on 21, but then as far as this bottom line, I'm about a 1/4 inch shorter on this page than I am on this page. You can see here. And so I'm just going to adjust that up a little bit and really kind of center it. That doesn't have to be perfect, but I do want this to be exactly 14 inches. So now I'm going to take just this little strip of fabric that I have, just some scrap fabric, and you can see that it's a little bit wider than my gap between the pages. So what I'm going to do is take this, I'm going to leave a little room at the top and a little room at the bottom. Put a little snip there. And then I'm going to tear it here. You know, and you can be precise about this too, or you can leave it overhanging. On my other pages, I've got kind of larger overhangs. I could still put another little snip and tear it off right where I want it on any of these at any point. And so I just like to leave stuff long and then deal with it later, because then that leaves me options if I want to do something with it. So that's kind of how I approach that. And then this is just really pretty simple here. I'm just going to use art glitter glue. It works great on fabric and paper, that's fine. You could obviously use Fabrifix, which is fabric glue. Pretty common in the junk journal thing here. Honestly, you could use just about anything you want to glue down your fabric, especially if you're going to go back through and sew it. You could probably even use glue stick just to hold it long enough to take it to the sewing machine and then run some stitches to really hold the fabric. That's what I've done in the past. But in this case, I'll use some art glitter glue. Now, with Fabrifix and with the art glitter glue, you want to use a tiny, tiny amount because it will kind of bleed through on the fabric and you'll have like a glue line on the fabric, and you really don't want that. And so what I'll do is first I'll run a tiny little bead, just like that. And then I'm going to take my fabric. I'm not going to stretch it, but I'm not going to let it be wrinkly either. Make sure we're straight here. And then I'm just going to lay that down fairly straight, making sure that I'm leaving enough room on both edges to get over here too. And you can see I have just a little bit of a glue line there. But when I sew over that, it's not going to show. You're going to get that with Fabrifix too, and that's part of the reason why honestly glue stick might even be better to use. It's not something you would think to use on this, but might actually be better. So then I'm going to hold this paper in place. I'm going to try really hard not to bump this one. Run just a thin little bead. Whoops, okay. I moved it. Okay, put it back. And there you have it. So you can see, even with a tiny bit of the art glitter glue, you still get some glue dots. And so that's just, it's gonna happen. But now, once it dries and you put some stitches over it, I have a few examples here. You can see, hopefully you can see, I don't see any glue marks on that at all. So I think it does kind of dry where you can't see it, the art glitter glue. I used art glitter glue on this too. So, once you have that, then you've got, on the back side, you have this. Now, there's a bunch of different things you could do here. You could put, if you don't like this, you could cover it with more fabric. You could put some lace over it. You could put paper over it. There's like a gazillion things you could do there. In my case, with my pages that I'm prepping for the signatures and getting the signatures done, I'm not going to do anything extra with these right now. I might. With some of them I might, but honestly, this one even folded over when I was sewing it. Whatever. Doesn't matter. I had like this fabric was too short, so I put an extra little piece and then it folded right there. I don't care. It's fine. But what you can see that I did here with the sewing machine is I just did a zigzag stitch right on the edge of the paper like that to kind of finish that paper edge. So you can do that, and it looks like that. Looks kind of cool. Of course, on this side you have this sort of frayed edge, and when it's in the book, when it's actually in the journal, you're going to see this, which is really cool. I like that technique because of that. So that's an option, but then as I said, if you wanted to just glue it and you don't want to sew it, then, you know, you could glue some paper over the top of it, like, okay, so this one we didn't sew yet. You know, you could do just about anything with this unfinished edge, but what I would recommend is then going through, and I've done this already with the other ones, line it up. Line it up. Remember that these aren't the same size, but we want this edge here to not be like this. We want it to be square. And so I would highly recommend lining up that edge right there and then ironing this fabric so that you have a nice crease, like just like with the paper. You want that nice crease there. Go ahead and build your signature, do all of that, sew your signatures in, and then come back later and do something with this so that you're not adding confusion and bulk when you're trying to get your signatures built and sewn in. So that's how I handle kind of doing the fabric ones. So that about does it for my hinging techniques that I'm going to use in this journal. All of my page prep and hinging is pretty much done. I've got all of the pages that I need to finish up assembling my signatures. And so that's honestly just a matter of now putting each page into a signature. As I said, I'm going to end up with 9 signatures of 10 pages each. And so I'm going to go through and do all of that work, and in the next video I will show you all 9 of the signatures and how they are assembled, and then we'll, at that point, then we can actually go ahead and build the spine for this journal, now that we'll know exactly how thick it's going to be, what size it needs to be. And so keep an eye out for that video. That should come out on Wednesday. So until then, I hope you have a good week. I hope this was gave you some ideas and some tips, and maybe put together some thoughts for you on how to deal with sort of landscape pages, a new idea maybe on using fabric for a spine or for a hinge. And so I hope that between now and Wednesday, hopefully maybe you'll play with this idea and put it to use in your own journals. And until Wednesday, be blessed, and we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.